They looked sleek. They screamed speed. But under the tank, these Japanese machines were mechanical wildcards. From frames that cracked at full lean to engines that nearly shook themselves apart. These are the 10 most dangerous Japanese motorcycles ever built. Stay till the end. One bike was literally banned from racing. The Suzuki TL-1000R was supposed to be Suzuki's V-twin answer to Ducati's dominance in world superbike. Instead, it became infamous for its unpredictable handling and deadly reputation. The engine was brilliant, a 996 cubic centimeter V-twin punching out 135 horsepower. But the chassis was a different story. Suzuki fitted it with a unique rotary rear damper that, in theory, saved weight and improved packaging. In practice, that rotary damper couldn't handle heat. After a few spirited corners, damping would fade drastically, and the rear wheel would start to bounce and slide under load. Combine that with a top-heavy chassis, twitchy throttle response, and underwhelming front-end feedback, and the TL-1000R earned its nickname, the Widowmaker Fave 2. Many riders complained of sudden high sides and tank slappers with no warning. Suzuki tried to fix it mid-production, but the damage was done. Most riders swapped out the rotary shock, but by then the bike's reputation was sealed. Fast, flawed, and frightening. And that's just the start. Next up, the bike they nicknamed the Widowmaker. Like and subscribe if you dare ride one. The Kawasaki H2 Mach 4 didn't earn the nickname the Widowmaker by accident. It was a two-stroke 750cc triple-cylinder rocket that could hit 60 miles per hour in under 5 seconds, in an era when most cars couldn't dream of keeping up. On paper, it was the hottest bike of its time. On the road, it was downright terrifying. The chassis was far too soft and under-engineered for the brute force coming out of the engine. Riders quickly discovered that if you grabbed too much throttle in a corner, the front end would lift, wobble, or launch into a tank slapper. The brakes were also borderline useless by today's standards, drum rear and a weak single-disc front. It was raw, loud, and explosive, and that's what made it popular. But it was also unforgiving. One bad throttle input or mistimed lean could launch you straight off the bike. The H2 Mach 4 was a legend, and a lethal one. The Yamaha RZ500 was a street-legal GP bike, a snarling two-stroke V4 that sounded like war and cornered like a dream, until it didn't. With its 499 cubic centimeter engine pumping out over 88 horsepower and a curb weight just above 400 pounds, the RZ500 was wickedly fast for its time. But that speed came with some serious consequences. Its biggest issue was unpredictable handling at the limit. The frame was made of mild steel and had noticeable flex when pushed hard. Combine that with a rear-biased weight distribution and abrupt power band, and you had a motorcycle that could snap into oversteer without warning. Riders who weren't extremely skilled often found themselves high-sided or running wide in corners when the power suddenly kicked in. It also had front-end instability under heavy braking. Without modern suspension tech to tame it, the RZ500 demanded absolute precision. It wasn't a commuter. It wasn't a toy. It was a knife-edge race bike, built for experts, not amateurs. The Honda RC30 is a legend, a hand-built race-bred homologation special that won in World Superbike and endurance racing. But what most fans forget is that this icon wasn't always friendly, especially off the track. Beneath the prestige and engineering, the RC30 could be dangerously unforgiving in the wrong hands. Its 748 cubic centimeter V4 engine made around 118 horsepower, but the power delivery was peaky, coming alive high in the rev range. Below 7,000 RPM, it felt sluggish. Then it hit like a hammer. That sudden power surge, paired with a tall first gear and stiff race suspension, made city riding a nightmare and tight corners unpredictable. Novices often got caught off guard mid-corner when the bike suddenly surged forward. Even worse, Early models had front fork dive issues under braking and were prone to stability problems at high speeds. For experienced racers, it was a dream. For casual riders, it could be downright dangerous. The Suzuki GSX R1100 was a brute, a big-bore superbike that shoved aside finesse in favor of sheer speed and power. Its 1,127 cubic centimeter engine produced around 143 horsepower in later years, making it one of the fastest production bikes of the 90s. But speed wasn't the problem. Stability was. The early GSX R1100s featured a lightweight aluminum frame that flexed heavily at high speeds. Combined with a soft, wallowy suspension setup and a heavy engine, this meant unpredictable handling during aggressive riding. Mid-corner corrections could lead to sudden front-end washouts or rear-end slides. Even on the straights, the chassis could shimmy under full throttle. As speeds climbed, so did the danger. Riders would push the bike hard, only to find it didn't track where they pointed it. It felt more like a missile than a motorcycle, with the accuracy of a bottle rocket. The GSX R1100 was a beast, but for many, it was a beast best left caged. Halfway in, and it only gets wilder. Next, a Kawasaki missile with a wobbly frame. Hit like to keep going full throttle. The Kawasaki ZX-10 Tomcat was a speed monster in its day, one of the first production bikes to break the 170 mph barrier. But in Kawasaki's rush to dominate the speed wars, they created a machine that was dangerously out of sync with its chassis. Its 997 cubic centimeter inline-4 engine was brutally powerful, making over 135 horsepower. But the steel frame it was bolted into, not up to the task. Under hard acceleration, especially at high speed, the chassis would flex, sometimes causing headshake or sudden instability mid-corner. The front end was notoriously vague, and braking hard from high speeds often left riders guessing where the front tire was planted. Cornering at speed took confidence, or recklessness. The suspension struggled to keep up with the bike's weight and pace. While it flew in a straight line, the ZX-10 was known for catching riders out when things got twisty. Fast, yes. Safe? Not exactly. The Yamaha FZR 1000 was a technological marvel for its time. The first production bike with an EXUP valve, a massive 145 horsepower inline-4, and aggressive track geometry. But under the surface, it had quirks that made it dangerously unpredictable, especially for riders without track-level skills. The early FZR 1000's aluminum delta box frame was stiff, but not perfectly balanced with the bike's weight and suspension. Mid-corner bumps could unsettle the chassis, and the tall gearing meant power came on suddenly, often at the worst possible moment. Add in a soft rear shock and dated tire tech, and riders had to wrestle the bike through corners rather than flow. What really made it risky was how fast it was without the forgiveness. A sudden twist of the throttle could send the rear sliding, and heavy braking could lock the front under poor road conditions. It wasn't a beginner's superbike. The FZR 1000 demanded skill, or it punished mistakes harshly. The first-generation Honda CBR 900RR changed the superbike game. Ultra-light, brutally fast, and sharp as a scalpel. But that surgical precision cut both ways. At just 185 kilograms dry, the original Fireblade weighed about as much as a 600cc, but packed nearly 125 horsepower. The result? A motorcycle that was almost too responsive. The early Fireblades had short wheelbases, steep steering angles, and lightning-fast turn-in. Great on a closed track, terrifying on bumpy roads. High-speed stability suffered, especially on uneven pavement, where the front end would skip or wiggle unpredictably. The suspension was lightly damped, making the bike feel twitchy under braking and sketchy in quick transitions. New riders loved the looks and power, but many were caught off guard by how quickly it could get away from them. One mistake in body position or throttle input, and it could flick you off like a fly. For all its brilliance, the early Fireblade was not for the faint of heart. The Kawasaki Ninja ZX-12R was built for one purpose: to dominate the speed wars. With a top speed of over 180 miles per hour and a 1,199 cubic centimeter inline 4, pushing nearly 180 horsepower, it was Kawasaki's high-tech missile aimed directly at Suzuki's Hayabusa. But with all that speed came serious danger. The ZX-12R featured a monocoque aluminum frame, which was stiff and aerodynamic, but gave the bike a very tall, top-heavy feel. Combined with a short wheelbase and aggressive geometry, this made high-speed stability a gamble. Riders reported head shake, tank slappers, and unpredictable front-end behavior, especially during hard acceleration or braking. Even the brakes, though powerful, could easily upset the chassis if not modulated perfectly. Add in a tall first gear, heavy throttle response, and a lot of weight, and the ZX-12R quickly earned a rep for being less forgiving than its rival. It was stupid fast, but it demanded respect, or it would remind you the hard way. The original Suzuki Hayabusa wasn't just fast, it was terrifyingly fast. With a 1,299 cubic centimeter engine pumping out 173 horsepower and a top speed of 194 miles per hour, it was the world's fastest production motorcycle when it launched. But here's the catch: the Hayabusa wasn't built for the track. It was a drag missile wrapped in a sport touring shell, and that made it dangerous in the wrong hands. At high speeds, the Hayabusa felt stable, sure, but if you weren't an experienced rider, the sheer speed would catch you out. It was heavy, with a long wheelbase and soft suspension, meaning tight corners and sudden stops became real challenges. Even slight mistakes on the throttle could send riders wide, or worse, into a wall of wind they weren't prepared for. And with no traction control or rider aids in early models, the Hayabusa was raw power. For skilled riders, it was magic. For everyone else, a high-speed trap with no mercy. These bikes weren't just fast, they were dangerous by design. From unstable frames to wild power bands, they pushed the limits of what riders could handle. Respect the machine or pay the price. Subscribe for more stories where engineering meets adrenaline, and sometimes disaster.